Welcome back to the KTP podcast, the show where we explore careers, insights, and everything in between. Each episode, we tackle a new topic to help you grow, learn, and stay ahead of your professional journey. Let's jump right into it.
My name is Jeffrey. I just graduated from UBC a few months back in May 2024. And I've always considered myself more of a builder. So when I was in high school, I had my own sneaker reselling business. And then going to university, really liked being involved. So had the chance to work with a bunch of different groups on campus and realized that, as a builder, but as someone who wants to get more experience with the startup space, it's very challenging as someone who doesn't code. So an opportunity that came by me was one to work in venture capital in second year. So I worked at a firm called Good News Ventures, learned more about venture capital, and from then on, I just realized it was a very interesting space for me, being able to work in VC and startups. So it led me to do a bunch of different things during university, include start my own startups club, get involved with other startups in Vancouver, as well as even now building my own startup.
Thanks for the intro, Jeffrey. So starting us off, why did you decide to study at UBC and your program specifically?
Well, let's backtrack a few decades. So my dad actually went to UBC and he studied 2 degrees at UBC. He did his first one in chemistry and he did his second one in electrical engineering. And I realized that UBC is a great school. Has a really great campus. It's very close to home for me. It's only about like a 15-minute commute. Awesome opportunity to kind of like carry on a family tradition. I ended up studying finance because I'd gone through school and high school, studying all three sciences. And I realized that, even though I put a lot of effort into pursuing these courses in sciences, I just wasn't getting the same marks as other students who were putting less effort. And I realized if I was going to be competitive in the real world, if I'm not getting like 100% with like putting 110% into my work, it's probably not for me. And I did take a few business courses in high school. So I think it gave me a really good introduction to things. And yeah, I guess I wasn't as great in the sciences, but I was very good at math. So I thought, finance would be a good opportunity for me to pursue.
That's really cool, man. Thanks for sharing that. I'm also curious, based off your dad already studying in UBC and you already having an interest in entrepreneurship and startup culture. I'm just curious, like what did your career path kind of look like? Where did you work previously? What was your first maybe potential professional internship experience like? Would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
When I was in high school, I was very, very ambitious. So I was very involved in a bunch of different clubs. And because I was very involved volunteering, they gave me the opportunity to, get my first aid and food safe certifications. And at one of the workshop, for the first aid workshop, I had met an instructor that was very inspiring to me. So I actually reached for a coffee chat when I was in grade 10. This is very early on. And from that coffee chat, I got to know the person. And it turns out that not only was the person a first aid trainer, he was also the CEO of the company. So we kind of chatted and I ended up working kind of a summer internship when I was in grade 10 at this small first aid company in BC. And it was more of a business operations role, but it gave me a good feel about business. And I think that was kind of what pivoted or helped me pivot from sciences more to business. So that was my first internship. But when I came into this first year at UBC, I was still exploring finance, like I was good at math, didn't know if this was for me, but there was an opportunity that I applied for at a company called Finning International. And it was for a corporate finance role and specifically in a department called Treasury. So it manages the risk of, the finances and cash at a company. I realized that it was a little too conservative for me. I realized that it was, dealing with risk and I wanted to take on a lot more risks. So I went, 180 and went into venture capital. So worked at two other venture capital firms. And then finally I realized that, I wanted to get some more experience, more maybe on the operator side at a tech company. So last summer I had the opportunity to work at Robinhood on the finance and strategy team.
Well, that's really sick, man. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, for someone who wants to work in venture capital, I bet there's a lot of people who are trying to do the same. What do you think are some of the most important skills that someone who wants to work in VC should have?
Yeah, that's always a very important question to ask, like not just for VC, but all different career fields, right? I think for VC specifically, you need to have a very strong curiosity for things. Like you can't just go in and want to do the 9 to 5 and have it over with. Like the job isn't as demanding as other, jobs in the capital markets, but I would say a core aspect of it is you're always learning about different things. During your 9 to 5 part of the venture capital job, you'll be looking through different types of companies every single day, from biotech companies to SaaS companies to hardware companies, depending on the company you work for. But at the companies I worked for, they had very general investment criteria. So we would see like 5,000 companies per year. So I would say curiosity is the main thing. Another thing too is you should be very good at building relationships with people. So, having gone on too many coffee chats with people and kind of built the ability to, chat with others, it's very important to be able to build very strong connections with founders, because you're always on the job pitching yourself and your firm to different founders. And you're also wanting to kind of build a strong relationship so that you're able to win these deals, especially in very competitive startup rounds where, one startup will get, 50 different bids for, allocation into their startup.
Wow, so you mentioned that you guys look at 5,000 companies per year. Like how do you identify which companies stand out the most, and how do you choose which ones you want to have a deal with?
Yeah, I think it was Good News Ventures that I saw 5,000 companies a year for. So I think during the summer that I worked there, our firm would go through at least 1,000 deals, and just kind of see them all across the internet and in-person events. In VC, it's very different from other fields where it's a lot about quantity, and then from that you kind of go down the funnel and realize that a lot of the ones out there are just not in your investment criteria. So sometimes they'll be a little too premature. Other times they'll be too mature. One thing that really helps is just setting very specific criteria for, industry verticals. So for some people, they'll invest in different things. So at Good News Ventures, we invested in everything software related. So it could be like 5G, IoT, crypto, anything that sort. But one of the things that helped us filter down was that plus geography. And then also looking at our own firm's criteria. So this is going more into whether we think a startup is viable or not. So they would ask the 3 questions: why you, why now, and why this. Why you asks more about founder market fit. So when you're investing in a startup, are the founders very risk averse or risk preferring? Are they willing to take bold steps towards, achieving their mission, or are they very conservative with their plays? For the why now part, it's talking about market timing. So looking at, why is now the best time to create this technology or create this startup? Is it because there's behavioral shifts, or is it because there's, advancements in the specific field of technology that's going to accelerate the adoption of your products? And then for why this, it's very similar to kind of traditional business. So why does your business stand out? Is there anything here that makes it 10 times or even 100 times greater than other alternatives in the market or incumbents? And with those criteria, it goes from, 1,000 companies that we saw during the summer just to about like 50 of them that we're sort of considering and would be wanting to chat with over the course of a few weeks.
I'm just curious, like, how is the AI trend kind of blending into this? And out of the companies that you've been looking at, obviously you must have a good range and exposure of different, startups and, probably already seed round funded companies as well. So I'm just curious as to how much of that has kind of changed in the last few years in terms of, like Gen AI coming up, and how do you also see kind of your role in your industry kind of either molding towards it, away from it? I'm just curious about your opinions on that.
Yeah, it's a loaded question. So maybe I'll start off with how AI picked off and kind of my perspective on that. So AI has been a topic of discussion for many decades, even since the 1950s or 60s. They've already known since the very early time that there would be artificial intelligence. They just haven't gotten to the point where it was ready for consumer adoption. And when ChatGPT came out, it was kind of the first point where AI wasn't just a research, theory anymore, but it was just something that landed in a consumer's kind of hands. And I think that was the time when, a lot of companies realized that AI isn't something that we just can't chat about anymore. It's something that we have to act on. So I think ChatGPT was the catalyst for AI adoption. And then from there, a lot of companies right now are thinking AI is going to be the next big thing. We'd rather overinvest in AI than underinvest. So to be quite frank, there is an AI bubble right now, very similar to crypto and very similar to the dot-com boom. And CEOs and VCs know this, but I guess their philosophy is they'd rather beg for forgiveness than beg for permission. So they want to kind of shell out as much money as possible just to see what the possibilities are for AI. In terms of where I see this going for startups specifically, right now there's a lot of funding going to AI companies just because companies don't want to miss out on the different possibilities for different use cases and whatnot. But how I see this affecting other types of business models is specifically SaaS. So when we look at a lot of B2B AI solutions, it's enabling a lot of these big corporations like Amazon, even TELUS in Canada, companies that are very mature to be able to create their own startups. One of the benefits of working or acquiring a startup is you get to gain very fast capabilities that internally at your mature company you wouldn't be able to gain. But if these AI startups are going to be able to offer the same thing, but in a more holistic way. So for example, if an AI startup told you, not only can I do this one specific solution for you just for customer service, and I can do it for everything from customer service to accounting to finance to marketing, large corporations will opt towards those types of business models instead of focusing in on a bit more vertical and niche kind of SaaS products in terms of ROI. So where I see this going is maybe almost the end of B2B SaaS. I'm not too sure when that will be, but I do foresee kind of AI becoming more mainstream and more adopted rather than traditional SaaS services now.
Sounds like there's a lot of information that someone needs to know if they want to get into venture capital. What are some common misconceptions about how to land a position?
I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there about VC. I think funny part about VC that I didn't know too much about it in the beginning was I thought VC was almost like a worse version of private equity or worse version of investment banking. I thought it was like the bottom of the barrel type of finance role. And I was like, man, I didn't get an investment banking role in my second year, but I got a VC role. Like this seems kind of sketchy because there weren't too many people kind of in my clubs and in my social circles that worked in VC. So I didn't know if it was actually like a respected or a credible path. So that's just one of the misconceptions that it's like worse or better than another. But actually, if you think about it, VC is the toughest area of finance to break into, maybe other than quants, because it's a lot of ex-investment bankers, ex-private equity analysts, a lot of people coming from startup backgrounds, ex-CEOs, just like everyone at the top of their fields, like the top 0.01% trying to make it into these VC roles. So I think that's a misconception that it's pretty easy to break into or it's not a respected role, but it's a very challenging field to break into. I think the second thing too is you need to be very strong with your technical capabilities to break into VC. It's not like investment banking or private equity where you can just memorize a bunch of like answers to questions, like break into Wall Street and like expect that to work out for you. VC requires a lot of critical thinking. So kind of similar to the questions you guys have been asking me, what are your thoughts on this specific industry and fields? 5 years out, what's your prediction for this? So you'll see a lot of people, creating blogs about, their thoughts about different technologies rather than just kind of spewing out like, oh, like I'm very capable at doing this financial modeling, therefore I'm good at, VC. I would say that's another misconception out there that you only have to focus on the technical skills, but you do have to also think about kind of the bigger picture with the economy and things.
Moving on to actually being on the job, sounds like you're in a high stress environment with a lot of really smart people. What are some of the biggest challenges you faced on the job and or some ways you resolved them?
There are times where the role can get very stressful. So it's not, a 9 to 5 every day. It can be 9 to 5, but a lot of the times you might spend time outside of your actual job in meetings, looking at new trends and new industries and new thoughts. You'll see a lot of people kind of following others on social media for this. So on Twitter, on different like blog sites like Medium, Substack, LinkedIn. I guess some of the problems that arise when it is stressful is just managing deal flow. So sometimes you're a very small firm. A lot of venture capital firms aren't built like, Big Four accounting or investment banks where they have like an army of analysts to work on things. Most VCs out there are very lean and small, so there'll be about 20 to 30 people max, even for the top firms out there. So when it comes to having a lot of deals going through that are very hot and time sensitive, I think it's more about setting your boundaries, more about focusing on the deals that you think would have the highest ROI. And sometimes people can be wrong about that. So if you're listening and you're curious about deals that have kind of fallen through the cracks or the hands of VCs, look into Bessemer Venture Partners anti-portfolio. It was a lot of companies out there that kind of fell through the cracks just because of partners at VC firms not being able to meet two companies at once, and they had to sacrifice one startup investment over the other. So I would say just managing your time and also making sure that you prioritize meeting startups that you think would have the highest ROI. I think that would be the best way to approach things. Other things too is making sure that you're being very respectful of people's time as well. So as a VC, not having too many meetings with a startup, and vice versa as a startup, not having too many meetings with a VC, just reducing the amount of like face-to-face time would kind of cut down on a lot of the stress and give you more time to focus on other things like due diligence and portfolio support.
That's great, man. Also, Jeffrey, I'm curious, given your experience and your time within the industry, maybe it could be from talking to, highly educated, highly professional people with lots of experience, or it could be from your actual job as well. I'm just curious, what's the biggest or the most critical lesson that you've learned so far, and how do you think that can probably be, kind of molded into your work now moving ahead?
I would say for me, just working in a few roles in VC, I would say I'm nowhere near an expert yet, but I would say that being an outlier and thinking like an outlier, I think that's the main thing that I took away from working in these VC roles. VC works on investing in companies that you think are not going to do very well. You think they're going to fail. It's kind of like investing in the companies that it's either a really, really bad startup or a really good startup. So an example of that was Airbnb. Like, the first look that a lot of VCs had with Airbnb is like, no one's going to pay some random person to live in a random place when they can live in a luxurious hotel that's way safer and it's already built out. Kind of similar to Uber too. Like, why would I get into a stranger's car when I can just get into a taxi ride that I trust? So it's investing in startups and thinking like someone who can see something different about things. And I don't think it's something that you could just learn in a day. I think it's all about pattern recognition. So the more you're in this space, the more you'll see like, okay, this startup, I've seen like way too many people, work on the same idea before. But when you're in the space long enough, you can think about, okay, this one, I haven't seen too much of it. And I know it's an outlier idea because of the way the person's talking about it and their experiences and what they've personally seen before. So I would say that's the biggest takeaway.
If you had to go through your professional journey again to land that first internship in VC or kind of to break into the industry, how would you do it from scratch?
Yeah, I think I consider myself very lucky to have been able to break into that role. At the time I thought, okay, this VC job is not investment banking. I was very focused on like, traditional finance at the time. So I was like, okay, I don't know if this is the best finance job for me, but we'll see where it goes. But now that I think about it, kind of mentoring younger students and talking to others, VC is a very challenging space to break into. So I was very fortunate to have that opportunity. But if I were to do it again, this is what I tell a lot of younger students who reach out to me. First, start off by specializing in something. VC, like I mentioned before, is about, investing in the 0.001% of startups they see, or investing in the outliers. So if you're like an average Joe and you come in with like, average things like, a good GPA, maybe good modeling skills, a basic kind of understanding of the industry. That's kind of like what all good applicants would have. But I think to break into VC, you have to have something special about yourself. So specialize in anything, like be very good at anything. So it could be like being hyper good at a specific sport. Like, I competed in provincials and I won like the gold medal in, I don't know, swimming or badminton. Or if you're very hyper focused on a specific industry. So if you're to apply to a VC firm that specializes in fintech, you could say, well, I'm a fintech expert because I've spent a few years just like building my own fintech product, or I have this Instagram page or TikTok page that discusses different fintech things. I know a lot about the industry and I'm hyper focused. That would offer a lot of value. So I would say anything that you could do to just be very specialized in one space, it does come at a cost. Like you might pigeonhole yourself, but if you really think that you like VC, then I would say that's probably the best way to do it, to hyper focus and specialize in one thing that would help you a lot in the job.
That's great and definitely on point. You know, given the current situation with the market and the jobs and stuff, I definitely agree with everything you're saying. But I want to kind of sidetrack a little bit away from all this professional conversation that we had so far. I'm just curious, you know, outside of your busy schedule with work and school beforehand, you know, what are some things you did to kind of unwind, just chill, you know, kind of reset maybe your thinking?
Yeah, I think this is really important. Like taking breaks, no matter how busy you are, like even the CEOs out there, they have their vacations, right? I don't know about Elon, but I think most people out there have their breaks. So I'm a very simple guy. I like to do things that are, not too expensive to kind of unwind, things that you could pretty much do anywhere. So in my free time, I like to do a lot of like long distance running. Like that's free. You could do that anywhere. I really like experimenting with different cooking recipes. So Pavan, like we cooked a lot when we were in Europe together. Really like that. Another thing I like to do is I've been getting a lot into reading. So, go to the library, get some books. I think it helps you de-stress because you're focused on just one thing instead of all the different things that are just hitting you in life, like school, job hunting, I don't know, like, social life. Like it's really nice to just like calm your mind down just doing like one simple thing. And I think that's the beauty of these like very simple tasks, like cooking, running, reading. And the last thing I've been getting into is boxing. So I did a bunch of boxing while I was in New York last summer, and I've been getting back into it now that I have more time.
Having a lot of hobbies outside of work is really important too. My final question for you, Jeffrey, is if you were to give one piece of advice to your first yourself, you're 18 years old, you're starting off at university again, well, what would it be?
I've thought about this question a lot, not just for this podcast, but a lot throughout university. I think the main piece of advice that I would give my first year self just coming into university is other people aren't your measure of success. So I think going into first year, I had a lot of imposter syndrome because I as myself, a freshman, was comparing myself against the achievements of other people who were like, fourth or fifth year. Like these guys were getting into all these great companies or had all these really top marks in their class. And as someone who just was getting into it, I think it was a challenge for me. So what I would tell younger people is your success isn't just by hitting the goals or the achievements of what others have already achieved. Your point of success should be comparing yourself to where you were before and where you are now. So, if you didn't have a specific skill or experience back then and you do now, like that to me is an achievement rather than comparing yourself to the achievements of others and seeing, okay, did I get it? Yes or no? Did I get the same internship? Yes or no? Like I would say that's probably not the best way of comparing success. And I think early on that was what I used, but as I approached, second, third, fourth year, it's really helped me a lot in terms of like being very positive about things and achieving the things that I wanted to do.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing, Jeffrey. That's all the questions we have for you.
Amazing. Thanks for having me on the podcast, guys.
Thank you for your time, man. Really great conversation. And it was, might I say, very honest and, very raw, which is, I really appreciate that.
And that's it for today. Thank you for listening to our episode, and we'll catch you at the next one.